You know what is gross and bigoted? Two creepy misogynistic guys teaming up to attack one woman online. Name-calling, lying, talking about my children, trying to get me fired. You two are disgusting and pathetic people. You are an arrogant know-it-all that presents himself as a passive-aggressive, morally superior person. And not only that, you only pick fights with women with another man helping you because you're not man enough to do it by yourself. I'm not intimidated by you, and your weak-shaming tactics don't work on me. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. You may actually have to pause this a few times to pray because it's going to be a long video, as we're cooking up a couple of soy boys who have decided to attack me. Basically, you have this guy, a passive-aggressive ex-Muslim who parades around like some sort of morally superior sentinel being that is above us Muslim savages. He was triggered by a video I made a while ago about ex-Muslims and decided to take it upon himself to respond to me, even though the video I initially made wasn't actually about him specifically. It was a response addressing ex-Muslim influencers that attacked me first. This little apostate dude wasn't even man enough to pick a fight with a girl on his own. He needed to get his boyfriend involved to help him target a lone Muslim woman, because you know there's nothing like targeting a lone Muslim woman online unless you have your bro to help you out while you do it. These two little creeps spent over an hour lying, making false assumptions and accusations, and disrespecting not only me, but brother Muhammad Ali, aka the Muslim Lantern, as well as Islam as a religion. Let's take a look.
I am an ex-Muslim and I make videos about my journey out of Islam and critiquing the religion in general. And today's video is by a Muslim YouTuber. She makes a lot of claims that are unkind and untrue, but I am biased. I do have a dog in this fight, so to speak. So I invited a friend.
I was raised as a fundamentalist Christian and I deconverted from Christianity.
Let's watch the video together.
I was aware of the ex-Muslim scene but largely ignored it because the majority of the people that form it are either attention seekers or extremely negative and self-obsessed. This video is not about anybody in particular. It's concentrating more so on the grift that is ex-Muslim social media.
A lot of the really conservative Christians that I respond to on my channel wish they could say this in an unfiltered way without catching flack from other people. This is really much more harsh than what I would expect to hear. To just say, oh, they're all fake and they're attention seekers and they're toxic individuals and they're even just pretending so that they can have some kind of monetary or social gain. That may be something that the most conservative, evangelical, fundamentalist type Christians think in private, but saying that in an unabashed way, they wouldn't. I mean, there are smaller creators maybe that would say stuff like this, but if you want to really be in the big leagues of Christian apologetics, you have to have a lot more decorum.
So firstly, this ex-Muslim guy proved my point. My initial video was not specifically targeting him, but he still chose to make a hit piece on me, which clearly shows, like I said in the clip of me that he played, that he is an insecure, self-obsessed attention seeker. I challenge you, show me an example of one ex-Muslim influencer online whose identity and grift isn't based on leaving Islam with the aim to make money or gain a following. And the ex-Christian guy is talking utter nonsense. Has he seen the videos Christian apologists with hundreds of thousands of followers do on ex-Christians that have converted to Islam? They disrespect these ex-Christians to a level that Muslims would never sink, even when it comes to ex-Muslims. Just go look at the videos David Wood has done on the Muslim cowboy, Jake the Muslim metaphysician, Rosie's Corner, etc., to name a few. The ex-Christian must only be referring to ex-Christians that are atheists, because the ones that convert to Islam must not count for him. Do some research before you talk, bro. Honestly, you're making yourself look dumb. And you would have noticed that he defended Christian apologists even though he's an ex-Christian by saying they're not as bad as us Muslim Dawah people. The prejudice is just disgusting. Let's watch the next clip.
This is outrageous.
Yeah, outrageous is absolutely the word for it.
On the one hand, we have the Quran telling us that there is no compulsion in religion, meaning we cannot force anyone to become Muslim. And on the other hand, we have the Hadith stating capital punishment is in place for those who leave, which is applicable in Sharia-run countries after a proper investigation and after giving the perpetrator the chance to repent. Let's look at a clip of the Muslim Lantern as he explains this really well.
When the Quran says there's no compulsion in religion, this is prior to accepting the message. So I cannot compel you to accept Islam. You cannot force someone who is a non-Muslim to enter into Islam. But once someone enters into Islam, there's obligations and responsibilities after making that choice. So what is democracy? Democracy is that the people, the majority choose the ruler, and the rules are applied in the country based on what the majority chose. So if the majority of the Muslims choose a law in their land, if you leave Islam in our country, you will be punished. You will have a capital punishment. Why is that a problem if you believe in democracy?
This clip is very important as I'll be referring back to it. You saw me refer to what the Quran says. You saw me refer to what the Hadith says. You saw me show a clip of the Muslim lantern explain why certain Sharia-run countries have certain laws. At no point did I say apostates should be killed, and at no point did I call for capital punishment to be applied to anyone whatsoever. And you will notice as the video goes on that these two sensationalists falsely accuse me of advocating for the death penalty for apostates. It's absolutely disgraceful that these morons would stoop so low by lying about me like this in order to serve their agenda.
Did you notice how they were talking about how there is no compulsion in religion, and that is still valid somehow, simultaneously, oxymoronically, but also if you leave, we will murder you?
If you were threatening to kill someone, I feel like that counts as compulsion.
This is in a video about how ex-Muslims are a scam and they're seedy. They're making our case for us very well.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't make you look like less of a scam yourself when you're saying you use violence to enforce your will or to have some kind of gain, whether that's political or social or whatever.
The only scammers here are these two soy boys. The ex-Muslim Aladdin and the ex-Christian Drew both falsely accuse me of calling for murder and killing, which is a blatant lie. I have never used violence against anybody in my life. I have never threatened anyone with violence, nor have I ever incited violence ever. So why lie? It just further proves you guys are scammers. It is you who is making my point for me that you're grifting, not the other way around.
The law of someone leaving his religion being punished can only be applied in a Sharia state. From an Islamic point of view, as I said, this can only be applied by the leader. Now, the second thing is this: how can I know that someone left his religion? The only way a Muslim or a state can establish that an individual has left the fold of Islam is for that individual to come himself and declare clearly in the public that he left the religion of Islam. So now he's not just leaving Islam, now he is inciting other people to leave Islam as well. Because when he declares something out loud to other individuals, then that thing can become a habit for other people or an easy thing for other people to also do, because he did it, I can do it too. And then when you have multiple individuals rioting and joining each other, leaving Islam, okay, we're not going to follow Islamic Sharia now because we left Islam. You don't tell me not to drink, you don't tell me not to steal, and you are under a Sharia state, and you will have a group of people who will cause revolution, corruption, and killing and stealing and murdering when they do that.
If someone is public about not believing, they're not trying to compel anyone else to believe. They don't make any consequences for anyone else. They're just saying, I personally don't, publicly. It's so clear that the system that they're arguing for is designed to stamp out any kind of opposition.
It's very clearly fascist, and it baffles me that this guy is able to say what he's saying wherever he is.
You'll notice Drew said if someone is public about being ex-Muslim, they are not trying to compel anyone else. He very conveniently leaves out the fact that this isn't just about people leaving Islam. It's about them leaving Islam, they're building a brand online, disrespecting it constantly. That's the scam. Why not just leave and live your life? Why go online and spread hate? It's discrimination and unnecessary. Just go live your life. What's with the agenda?
They're explicitly telling us that we want to silence you, but their rationale is if you are not silenced, you're going to start going around stealing and killing and murdering as if they just care about the greater good. That's why they want to execute us.
If you want to make the claim that, apostasy leads to higher crime rates or more violence or something like that, you have to demonstrate that. Provide some sort of evidence, some kind of study, something like that.
But the way that this guy thinks and she thinks, and a lot of Muslims unfortunately think, is that God said, or the Prophet said, that those people will spread corruption in the land, and they run with it. The average Muslim can like and subscribe and watch this video and leave a comment saying, MashaAllah sister, MashaAllah brother, you proved these scammers wrong.
So Aladdin with the COVID mask on, I really should send him a niqab to wear since he's so afraid as a man to be on camera. At least I have a religious reason as a woman to cover my face. He's just a coward. Aladdin falsely accuses me of wanting to silence him and execute him. I said no such thing. Let me be clear, I have not and will never call for any violence against anyone ever. And Drew said we have to provide stats to prove apostasy leads to higher crime rates. No, we don't. Because we're not making this claim. We're simply saying this is what a Sharia-run country's logic behind having these laws in place is. It just shows Drew's unconscious Western colonial mindset that other cultures and countries can't have their laws in place. We have blasphemy laws in place to stop people speaking against the rainbow community in the West, even if they're doing something wrong. We just accept it. You just have to accept it, Drew. Some governments have laws that not everyone will agree with, but because they're laws, you don't break them. Aladdin also seems to not like Muslims supporting me and the Muslim lantern. It seems to burn him up when they leave comments acknowledging that we prove scammers like him wrong. It's understandable. He's extremely triggered that his grift is being exposed.
If a person declares that he left Islam, there is a period of repentance. The state brings him and say to him, repent or you will be punished. And that period can go up to 20 days or can be just 3 days, but not less than 3 days. They will say to him, repent or you will be punished. So now he has a choice to lie and say, oh yeah, I came back to Islam. In essence, the only way that capital punishment is applied on you in Islam is if you choose to be killed. That's the only way you can be punished Islamically with that punishment of apostasy, if you choose to be killed. Otherwise, you can lie and say, I became a Muslim, and then you will become what we call a munafiq. A munafiq is a hypocrite, someone who shows belief and hides disbelief. And then these people existed at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. They were not punished. Even though the Prophet had a list of all of the hypocrites at his time, he did not punish them because they showed outwardly that they were believers. So in the community, do you show that we are believers, we believe in Allah, we're Muslims? Whatever they hide and they conceal in their heart is a punishment for them in the afterlife and the day of judgment.
First of all, making a decision as to whether or not you believe in Islam requires so much more time to really sort out than 3 days or 20 days.
If a sheikh today can convert someone back into Islam in 3 days, what the hell was the Prophet doing for years trying to convince people? It's like this guy put it, you just lie and don't get killed.
Yeah, and why do they want liars? Why do they want tons of fake Muslims? Ultimately, my guess for why is that they want to maintain political and cultural control. They want to maintain the image of this like perfect Islamic society, even though there's a bunch of people just pretending.
And I hate that he's victim blaming. He says, technically the only way that capital punishment could be applied to you is if you choose to be killed. This kind of rhetoric would not be tolerated if it was said by a Christian about atheists in the US, for example. So I don't understand how Muslims can be simultaneously a persecuted group that people have to handle with gloves, and at the same time they could say whatever they want and they get away with it.
The point Brother Muhammad Ali is making is not that we want fake believers or that we can convert people back in 3 days like these two cynical clowns are insinuating. His point is the apostasy law in Sharia-run countries is so loose and easy to dodge, you would have to be an absolute idiot to be punished by it. And good old Drew once again displays his colonial mentality by guessing why countries he has never been to are not as civilized as the one he lives in. There's no victim blaming like Aladdin cried about. Once again, the Muslim lantern is simply saying these laws are easy to dodge. That's all. And Aladdin claimed this is being said about ex-Muslims in the West. This guy isn't even listening to what's being said. The brother specifically said in Sharia countries, not the West. And Aladdin is totally wrong about Muslims being able to freely say what they want. If a Jewish or a Christian or atheist person made a statement that was aggressive, they're not labelled and stereotyped as extremists the same way Muslims are. No one handles us with kid gloves, like he said. It's the opposite. We have to stand up for ourselves because of the hatred towards us.
All they've said is how to justify our murder. So how dare us object to that?
So as you heard the brother say, if someone becomes an ex-Muslim without making a song and dance about it by announcing it to the world on social media, they can just get on with their lives, even in a Sharia country. But those who choose to make it public when in a Sharia country are violating that country's law, as it is seen as disrespect to sacred faith with the motive to harm others by leading them astray. And as the brother said, the logic behind this is if that person is outside the bounds of what is halal in Islam, they're capable of forbidden things, like lethal violence, rape, theft, etc., all of which is haram for Muslims. Obviously, this law is not applicable in the West, which is evident through the numerous ex-Muslims on social media with massive brands built on constantly demonizing Islam whilst making a living from it. Also, average citizens in a Sharia country can't carry out the punishment for apostasy, as only the authorities in those nations have that power. But even if you are in a non-Sharia country, why do ex-Muslims not just leave Islam quietly and get on with their lives?
So her logic is that if you don't have morality given to you by Islam, or if you don't have a governing law system, which is Sharia, to tell you not to murder people, you are now more capable of murdering people, ignoring the fact that people who proclaim to be believers do commit all of these acts. She demonizes us.
So here you saw this clown lie and say I called for his murder, when all I did say was what the hadith says, and I quoted what Brother Muhammad Ali said, and I did not call for anyone to be harmed at all. How horrible of this guy to make these claims. I never said a word about you personally. I didn't even know who you were before you made this hit piece on me completely lying about me.
Most of her worldview is not built on data. It's built on God said. And what's crazy here is that in her bio, she says she has a master's degree in psychology. This
What?
is an educated person. Yes, I know. This is not just the case of someone who has not gone to school and their whole worldview is just shaped by religion. People like her are immune to science. They go and study in institutions where they're taught to think critically, and they don't learn anything from that. They put their beliefs in a bubble and they put everything else in another bubble. And somehow she is qualified as a psychologist.
That's wild, especially because I have a psychology degree and I didn't complete my master's in psychology, but I have master's coursework under my belt. In my experience, something psychologically that she's kind of displaying here does happen in Christianity, but not to the point where we're like advocating for killing people because of it.
These two misogynistic Islamophobes team up to psychoanalyze me. Aladdin says my worldview isn't built on data. That's very chauvinistic of you to assume so, little buddy. He said, I'm immune to science and I choose not to think critically. Spoiler alert, I have lived the majority of my life as a cultural Muslim, especially during the period when I was studying for my master's, and it left me with a spiritual void. Because of that, I then decided to get Islamic qualifications, especially after I had my children, and it was just a few years ago that I made the decision to choose the daily practice of Islam because it made more sense to me. What qualifications do you have, Aladdin? Let's look at his bio. It says, helping ex-Muslims, normalizing dissent, eradicating blasphemy stigma, and voicing my thoughts. I wear a mask for anonymity and safety. Seems like his only qualification is wearing a mask. Newsflash, Aladdin, psychology isn't a proven science like physics or biology or chemistry. It's trial and error. You would know that if you were educated. And yes, I'm glad it triggers you that I'm a qualified psychologist and you're just a random idiot on the internet running his mouth. Drew is also surprised that a Muslim woman dressed in religious attire can be more educated than him in the field he chose to study. He also falsely accuses me of wanting to kill people. Once again, I have never advocated for violence against anyone in my life ever, nor will I ever do so. And Drew, please leave the psychoanalysis to the experts. You didn't even finish your degree, so you need to relax and go study some more. Let's look at more of their lies.
To add to that, she says that she's a marriage and parenting expert, and she specializes in providing solutions and advice for Western Muslims to have successful relationships and outcomes with their spouses and children in an Islamic context. I struggle to think of how she could help a parent or a family that has a child or a son or a daughter who has issues with religion, because her message is basically, as you're going to see, shun them, because otherwise they would have been murdered. She also says that ex-Muslims in the West do this whole song and dance on social media. They can't do it freely in the Middle East. They can't advocate for themselves. They can't talk about the religion and how it harms people and critique the religion in an academic way even. They're in a lot of danger if they do that in the Middle East, as we've seen time and time again. So their presence in the West is only evidence that they're afforded the freedom in the West to be able to do that. So I don't see how that proves anything. If anything, it proves that their fascist regimes are working. And is it really dramatic to do a song and dance when these people are calling for your death? And to look at her, she's wearing an niqab, she's displaying herself as a Muslim woman, and that could be considered a song and dance in and of itself. But beyond that, her title of her channel has Muslim in it. She talks about everything with an Islamic lens. So how is that not parading her beliefs and openly talking about them? And how is that any different than someone saying, I don't believe this religion, and this religion is planning to harm me if they could?
So Aladdin is lying again by saying that my message is to shun children because they'll be murdered. I never advocated for murder or for children being shunned. This guy is a creep and a liar. He proves my point again through his continued song and dance about being an ex-Muslim. That is all he has amounted to in his life. This is who he is, an ex-Muslim, nothing more. That's it. That's his whole identity, and that's why he's so triggered. What I'm wearing and talking about is not a song and dance, so stop justifying ex-Muslim attention-seeking behaviour by criticising a Muslim woman's dress code. I speak about my faith to help people. You speak about leaving a faith to serve your ego and lead people astray. Why should people listen to you? What have you achieved except from leaving Islam? How are you an example to follow? You give no benefit except crying online about being an ex-Muslim. And then he goes on to call the Middle East fascist, which is a horribly prejudicial comment, and again he falsely accuses me of wanting to take its life.
And it bothers me how they always fall back on, well, hey, we can't just murder you on the street. Only the government gets to do that. Because A, it does happen. When you tell someone that this class of people deserves to be punished, they're going to take matters into their own hands. Secondly, that doesn't make it any better. Just to say that you need a court order to do it, or you need paperwork to get it done, that just doesn't absolve you of the moral guilt of it.
But even if you are in a non-Sharia country, why do ex-Muslims not just leave Islam quietly and get on with their lives? Why all the attention-seeking noise? And why the constant hate towards a belief system which billions of people hold dear afterwards? And then when there's pushback when Muslims are offended, these people play the victim. You don't see the majority of Muslim reverts that are ex-Christians do the same thing. And in the rare instances of when reverts do so, it's usually in response to criticism from anti-Muslims that choose to attack the Muslims first. I've seen and heard some ex-Muslims be so anti-Muslim that they shockingly encourage what's happening to innocent people in Palestine, which is absolutely crazy to me. They're so filled with hate that they don't even have empathy for their fellow human beings, just because they happen to be Muslim.
I have seen the occasional example of someone being like, oh yeah, what's happening in Palestine is fine because of whatever. But I mean, she's also advocating that a very large number of people be essentially genocided.
There are indeed people who take Islam to be the enemy and Muslims to be the enemy, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And they have terrible takes because of that. And I personally have openly criticized such people. She has the conclusion that there must be a reason why we deserve to be executed. And she looks for anecdotal data that justifies that.
And here you have him once again falsely accusing me of advocating for murder, which I never did so and never will do so. All I did say was that the hadith says, and quote what a fellow Muslim content creator said, most ex-Muslim influencers do not have empathy for Muslims. They look down on Muslims and Islam. You may present yourself as the exception, but your views in this video about me show you think you're morally superior to me just because you're an ex-Muslim. And if you look online at the things ex-Muslims say about Muslims, there's no empathy. There's mostly resentment. Then Drew goes on to falsely accuse me of wanting all ex-Muslims to be genocided. This is a disgusting false accusation. Once again, I have never called for any harm to come to anyone, Muslim, ex-Muslim, whatever. Even when it comes to Palestine, I've said that if the same thing that is happening to Muslims and Christians in Palestine was happening to Jewish people, I would be just as vocal about it and against it. At the very least, Aladdin admits that there are ex-Muslims that have horrible views on Palestine because of their hatred for Islam. But he then went on to lie again by saying that I think all ex-Muslims have that view, despite playing a clip of me saying the word some ex-Muslims. What is wrong with this guy? And this is why I doubt his authenticity. He has an agenda and is blatantly generalizing me despite playing the evidence of me saying the opposite. And then if it wasn't bad enough, little Aladdin goes on to once again falsely accuse me of wanting him to be executed. I'm lost for words at him playing the victim like this, despite never saying this about him or anyone else for that matter ever.
She considers criticism of the Muslim world or of Islam to be hatred. And it seems like she's advocating for like literally killing people unfairly. I think it's pretty reasonable for you to say something.
But to her, unfortunately, she sees the world as hate and love, black and white, enemies and allies. There's no in between. So she views any criticism of her belief system as hate towards her and 1 point whatever billion people. She probably even calls it Islamophobia, calls it bigotry. And let me remind you that we're talking about a belief system that's just right now, her own words, advocating for murdering me. And me protesting it is the hateful action here. It's victim blaming to the 10th degree. And she dares to say that we started and then we call ourselves victims.
Drew said I consider anyone criticising Islam as hatred. That's another very chauvinistic assumption, Drew, telling me what I think. I'm talking about ex-Muslim influencers specifically, so go do some research and look at 90% of their brands. They're not respectfully critiquing. They're blatantly making a mockery of Muslims and Islam by using slurs and even destroying our holy book in some cases. And as liberal as Drew appears to present himself as, you're not seeing that as discrimination shows you are either ignorant about it or more worryingly that you think along the same lines. And once again, Drew lies through his teeth by saying I'm advocating for killing people when all I did was explain what hadith says and why a small amount of countries who follow Sharia apply this law by using another content creator's explanation. At no point did I advocate for killing anyone and I never will. Drew also uses this false accusation to justify why Aladdin should speak up against Islam, which is disgraceful and mind-boggling. Aladdin, the expert on everything and nothing, psychoanalyzes me once again by stereotyping me as an extremist. You know nothing about me, but because I'm Muslim, you feel like you can generalize me. You're an arrogant know-it-all that presents himself as a passive-aggressive, morally superior person, when all you're doing is grifting online using the same old ex-Muslim scam with a twist of you're not as bad as the others. It's totally transparent. It is Islamophobia and it is bigotry. When 40,000 of our people die and it's called self-defense. When Muslim countries are invaded on false premises, it's bigotry. When we are made to feel less stand because of our religious beliefs, it is bigotry, and you want to come in and add to it by crying about leaving Islam. Just be an ex-Muslim and leave us alone, but you can't because you have a brand to build, right? And again, without fail, Aladdin falsely accuses me of wanting his life to end. It's absolutely disgusting. You're not protesting Islam because you're in danger. You're creating drama. You're in the West. No harm can come to you. In most Muslim countries, if not all, no harm can come to you unless you are an idiot. You say I'm victim blaming. That's rubbish. And yes, you're playing the victim. And yes, you did start it. Your ex-Muslim community always start the trouble with us. You're two grown men ganging up on a lone Muslim woman online because you think I'm an easy target that won't respond. How disgracefully misogynistic of you both. And just so you know, if you do 100 videos, I'll do 100 responses. My initial video was a general response to unprovoked hate I had received from the ex-Muslim community. I wasn't starting anything. I'm not intimidated by you, and your weak shaming tactics don't work on me. Let's take a look at the next clip.
Her, on the other hand, she's advocating for treating us in inhumane ways, calling us all sorts of names with absolutely zero empathy. So I find that ironic. Most of her videos are just reacting to what other popular characters have said. Not all of them are related to the Islam world, but she puts an Islamic twist on it. So she is gaining a lot of attention. She's looking at the world from a Muslim lens.
I also noticed a pattern where most ex-Muslims, not all, but most are normally atheists. However, the people that follow them aren't just atheists or Islamophobes. You have Christian apologists and even Hindus fanning out over this venomous, hateful content. Let's take a look at another short clip of Brother Muhammad Ali speaking about the scam that is ex-Muslim social media, which these fraudsters have been profiting from for decades in some cases.
Today is a business. They make a channel, they claim their ex this, and they start making the whole channel about Islam, and then they make money and they ask people to donate for them. It's a business basically. That okay, I left Islam, but support me because I'm persecuted. Why is the reason you left Islam? People always who come and left Islam and ask them this question, they don't have an answer for it. Which for me, unfortunately, is a sign of insincerity. Because if someone pinpoints a problem, I can solve it. But if there is no problem that can be pinpointed, how can you fix something that you cannot even identify?
They have no marketable skill except, hey, I'm a Muslim and this is my take on so-and-so, and my whole identity on this channel is that I'm a Muslim, and yet they dare point at us and say that we're doing it as a scam and a grift.
When it comes to Dawah channels, they cannot create their own content which is entirely original. That's not how it works. They have to cite or rip somebody else off and market it as their content.
There's not really much of a risk to be a Muslim person talking about Islam. Sure, you might get a few hateful comments here and there from Christians or critics of Islam or whoever else, even bigots, but you're not really in any real danger. You won't be doxxed at the same rates as ex-Muslims are. No one is going to say you deserve to be executed. Your family's not going to disown you. And if you can read Qur'an well, you'll make a lot of money doing it. So if I was a grifter, as many people have pointed out, I'd just be reading Qur'an on my channel. That would be a much more peaceful, much more productive way to make money. And I want to remind people that I literally left my job to do this. I still get paid a third of what I used to get paid because I think this is urgent, this is important, and this is a good reminder to ask you people, and I have no shame in this, if you would like to be a supporter, links are in the description, because if I don't do this, if other people like me don't do this, all our representation is going to be people like her and people like him getting paid way more than we are.
So once again, Aladdin lies that I advocate for ex-Muslims to be treated inhumanely, a claim that I myself have never made. And then he proceeds to criticize the content I make. That's rich coming from you, someone whose channel depicts burning Qur'ans in thumbnails, the disrespect of God and the Prophet Muhammad, as well as making fun of and name-calling Muslim content creators. For your information, all my content is Islamic or related to Muslims. It's marketed in a way to make people want to view it, and once they do, there is a religious lesson in it. I couldn't care less about what you think about the videos I put out. Massive channels on YouTube do reaction videos and streams like I do. Aladdin seems triggered by my videos doing well. What is wrong with these grifters? Concentrate on yourself. Look, if people choose to fund my channel Islamically, there's nothing wrong with that. I promote my religious views. You, on the other hand, promote your hatred of a religion you left and beg people for donations to fund your hatred. That's an outright grift. He even admitted himself that many people are calling him a grifter.
If I was a grifter, as many people have pointed out,
if the shoe fits, wear it. He said Muslim content creators have no marketable skills. I think you're talking about yourself there, little bro. The funny thing is, without Islam, your brand would cease to exist. Again, what do you have to offer except you left a religion? It's pretty pathetic that your whole existence and relevancy as a content creator depends on the thing you hate the most. Aladdin lies again, talking about there is no risk for Muslim content creators. We get hatred and threats of violence not only from ex-Muslims, but also from Christian apologists, Hindus, atheists, nationalists, extremists, liberals, and conservatives, all of whom support ex-Muslims. So stop projecting you're not a marginalized group, we are. He said he could just read Quran and make money online. Those channels don't make much money at all. He's clutching at straws here because he's trying to protect his grift. And then he goes on to give the sob story that he's risking his life to ask for your donations. It's shameless scamming. He also seems quite hurt that the Muslim Lantern and I are making more money than him on YouTube, and that just reeks of insecurity, Aladdin. It's crazy how we're somehow making more money than you with apparently no marketable skills, as you said. Drew's comment about Dawah channels was hypocritical. The cognitive dissonance he displays is astounding. You do realise that you're ripping off my content to make the accusatory point that Muslims are not original and are ripping off other people's content. Nice try, bro.
We have to rely on the individual contributions of people, and to her point that she says most of our audience is, I don't remember how she phrased it exactly, but she said they're Christians and Hindus and other haters. It is true that there's a bunch of groups out there who try to hijack our voices as critics of Islam, as ex-Muslims, to say, and this is why my religion is true, or and this is why my religion is better. But a lot of us are explicitly vocal about not wanting them in our midst. And that's why my channel has grown so slowly, is I've avoided collaborations with channels that do rely on that sort of voice in their audience. But if I was doing what she's accusing us of doing, I would reach out to one of those groups that you have just mentioned. I would reach out to a church and ask them to covertly fund me as someone who's fighting the good fight. Even if I'm not spreading Christianity, I could get funding from a church just to criticize Islam. Instead, I'm here and asking people for donations. I'm working a part-time job. I'm making ends meet.
So apart from Aladdin once again begging for donations and crying about being broke because of his part-time job, I'll give him some credit. He admitted Islamophobes do follow the ex-Muslim community, but he himself doesn't encourage or engage with it. He has an exception, but the rule is the biggest ex-Muslim brands totally capitalize on this and scam hard using the anti-Muslim angle. And I must remind viewers again that my initial video was a response to that same majority of ex-Muslim influencers. Aladdin is the one that took it upon himself to make my video about him and by default chose to represent them. You would have noticed he uses the words us or we when referring to all ex-Muslim content creators. Even though he claims to not be like them, you're defeating your own argument, Aladdin. Why are you pretending this is a noble mission when it's just about milking being an ex-Muslim for clout? You're clearly grifting, bro. What I find a lot of these ex-Muslims and even cultural Muslims that are ashamed of their religion have in common is that they have overinflated egos and a disproportional sense of self-importance, whilst at the same time having low self-esteem. For example, if you respond to one of them after they initially attack you, normally they just fold, or they take it so personally they rant and rave about it forever. I've noticed they also use anti-Muslim stereotypes to generalize any criticism of them as Islamic extremism, or they claim Muslims are brainwashed simply because they practice their religion properly and reject secular mental programming, which is actual planned and marketed brainwashing. These ex-Muslims and cultural Muslims act as if they've got it all figured out, but most of these people are fully grown adults that are immature lost souls. And when I say a middle-aged person should not act like a child, it's not ageist. It's simply saying your life is a mess if you still can't make adult decisions at that ripe age, especially if you're guiding children. It's selfish and irresponsible.
What she's saying does kind of seem like Islamic extremism. I don't think that you're a man-child for pointing that out. And to insinuate such is really just to take any of the responsibility off of her for her own statements and place it onto you for your reaction. It's more victim blaming is all it is.
It's really blatant how she's just going for character assassination and nothing really to acknowledge the criticism of her religion.
Everything I just said in the clip of me they just played applies to them. Two self-obsessed atheists know-alls ganging up on women online to do a hit piece for an hour plus because my video exposed their insecurities despite it not even being about them directly. They stereotyped me as an Islamic extremist by making false assumptions and accusations. They cast doubts over my professional qualifications and my work helping Muslim families as well as my content. And let's not forget they lied and said I'm calling for apostates to be unalived, which I never did. Then they go back to their go-to of shaming tactics, calling what I'm saying victim blaming and character assassination, as if my initial video was specifically about them, which it wasn't. But that didn't stop them from crying like they're victims when they actually chose to attack me first. And I wasn't even referring to them specifically in the first place. It's spineless and creepy behavior. And if you're so different from the majority of the ex-Muslim influencer cult, why did you choose to represent all of them by responding to my video? It makes no sense. You could have reached out and we could have had a conversation or a debate, but no, you and your buddy decided to be tough guys and harass a lone woman online. And in fact, it is you that are attempting to assassinate my character.
And notice how I don't talk about Muslims or even the Dawah people that way. I don't say that they're saying what they're saying because they're self-absorbed, because they have low self-esteem, because they're terrible people. I have the empathy and the understanding that a lot of their bad beliefs are informed by their understanding of the world from a religious lens, and a lot of it is informed by fear. They are terrorized by their religion into thinking this way, and I give them the benefit of the doubt. But the other way around, she accuses people like me of just spreading hate against people like her and just being too simplistic about things when it's actually nuances on our side, not on theirs.
The reason why people spread these negative characterizations and do these character assassinations on apostates, whether it's in Christianity or in Islam, it's just to protect their in-group. It's to make their in-group look better and to put down their out-group. It's not a logical or rational argument for why they're right. It's just saying, well, they're bad people and we're good people, so you should listen to us.
What she's saying is victimizing a lot of questioning Muslims and a lot of Muslims who don't think like her. But unfortunately, her position is the more traditionally religious one. So this is bad for Muslims.
Aladdin, are you being serious? You have no hatred towards the Dawa people? Seriously? You just did an hour-plus hit piece on me and the Muslim Lantern full of defamation and lies and name-calling. You also made videos hating on Mohammed Hijab and Ali Dawa. Do you have no sense or accountability or self-awareness? And then he gets on his high horse by saying, I have empathy for the Muslim savages because they're not intelligent enough to think beyond their religious beliefs. There you go again with that overinflated ego and passive-aggressive superiority complex. I'll remind you again that it was only a few years ago that I decided to embrace Islam fully. I lived a life fully integrated in the West, and I made a conscious decision to become a practicing Muslim. I noticed how Aladdin said our side and not their side.
Our side, not on theirs.
So you're once again saying you're no different from the ex-Muslim influencers you want to differentiate from. The fact is, I accused you of nothing personally. You just identify so heavily with your online cult that you got triggered by my video responding to them and took it so personal that you decided to attack me. Your fellow ex-Muslim influencer Haris Sultan attacked you for attacking apostate prophet, but you were too scared to even respond. Why was that? Is it because he's a man and you only pick fights with women? And not only that, you only pick fights with women with another man helping you because you're not man enough to do it by yourself. And then Drew also accused my video of being about some sort of demonization of an outgroup. Once again, it was a response. And once again, he's making false assumptions. If you watch my original video, I say I ignored the ex-Muslim community. It was only when I was attacked, I defended myself like I'm doing right now. And our simple-minded friend Aladdin said my position on Islam, which has always been unity and avoiding negativity, is bad for Muslims. But his position of denouncing and demonizing the faith is somehow better for Muslims. Okay, pal, whatever you say.
I want to speak on the idea that, in secular communities, secular ideas are just as much brainwashing as anything else. You certainly can make an argument for undue influence in secular communities as well. Like it happens in all human communities, undue influence, where people are doing something like indoctrination or brainwashing or whatever. But let's just think here for a second. Is undue influence, coercion, indoctrination of children more likely to happen when the children have access to a diversity of information from many different perspectives, like in most, if not basically all, secular communities or secular countries? Or is it more likely to happen when anybody who disagrees with one perspective is murdered?
And she's one to talk because she probably advocates for teaching kids about religion, making them memorize Qur'an, praying, all that sort of stuff, which is indoctrination and some might say even brainwashing.
Yes, Aladdin, I 100% advocate teaching my children about learning their religion over the secular nonsense that you and Drew, who probably don't even have kids, are advocating for. And Drew, I totally disagree with you. In secular societies, kids are being brainwashed by social media. The mainstream media and the schooling system is teaching them adult-themed things that are not age-appropriate. It's much more dangerous for children to learn liberal, atheist, secular values than it is Islam or even Christianity or Judaism. You boys need to stop worrying about other people's kids. Frankly, it's a bit sketchy you're even speaking about children in any context. Leave the parenting to the parents, guys. And Aladdin, word of advice, it's probably best you don't use pictures of children in your content. Not cool.
No, I know that there are times within Islam to throw stones at the devil. This is not a time to throw stones.
Some of the best practicing Muslims are new reverts. They're not brainwashed at all. They've made an informed decision to become Muslim after learning the deen and living it, which is the opposite of the majority of ex-Muslims and cultural Muslims, who may have even read about Islam in detail, but never practiced it properly on a daily basis.
She thinks if someone researches Islam and makes a decision one way, they're a good person. If they make a decision the other way, they're a bad person. She doesn't seem to comprehend or acknowledge that someone disagreeing with your philosophy on God doesn't mean that they deserve to be tortured. And notice how she said new reverts. I think that is not intentional, but it's important because new reverts are usually people with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy. That is a very different energy than someone 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line. I have spoken to so many people who have converted to Islam for one reason or another, and they eventually leave the religion. They don't get counted in the statistics of people who leave or join. They're just paraded around when they first join.
Which is the opposite of the majority of ex-Muslims and cultural Muslims, who may have even read about Islam in detail, but never practiced it properly on a daily basis for a prolonged period of time. Normally, people like this have friend groups consisting of only atheists, or just Christian apologists, or solely Hindus, and have never actually had close friends that are real practicing Muslims. And it is in fact them that are brainwashed by the culture of the country they grew up in.
So how does this apply to me? I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I was surrounded by Muslims, and I still have a lot of Muslims in my life that I care about. I've practiced probably since a younger age than her. I can probably read the Qur'an better than she can, but she would refuse to acknowledge that a person like me could theoretically exist.
So Drew came in with the Islamophobic comment making fun of a Muslim ritual of throwing stones during pilgrimage. Real classy. And Aladdin, as usual, makes more false assumptions by saying that I supposedly said if someone studies Islam and becomes Muslim, they're a good person, and if someone studies it and leaves, they're a bad person. I never said that. You did. What I actually said was reverts study Islam and become Muslims. Apostates haven't studied Islam or lived it properly, and that's why they leave. Whether you agree with that or not, don't twist my words to suit your narratives. Aladdin then expands his false accusations to saying if someone disagrees with my views on God, they deserve to be tortured. You can't make this stuff up. Once again, I have never advocated for torture or violence of any kind. So then Aladdin comes in with a big gotcha moment when he told Drew, notice she's talking about new reverts, but what about old reverts? They all leave Islam. The fact is, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world despite people leaving. And to counter Aladdin's argument, I've spoken to so many reverts who have never left Islam and converted decades ago. And when it comes to Aladdin reading the Quran better than me, I would be surprised if he even knows the full Salah prayer. In regards to him growing up in Saudi Arabia, there are plenty of expat families that migrate to places like Saudi and live in Western compounds. Their kids attend Western schools and their communities consist of mainly Westerners. I can't be sure that's how he grew up. From how he speaks English, it doesn't seem like he was integrated in the local Saudi community.
If a Muslim or a believer in general were to acknowledge the existence of a sincere and honest and well-meaning disbeliever, it would almost have to shatter their belief system. Either they have to reconstruct one with some sort of lovey-dovey version of God that won't send that person to hell, or they go the other way around and refuse to acknowledge that such a person could even hypothetically exist. Why do vocal ex-Muslims exist? Because you keep repeating false accusations and false characterizations of us. I'm not sure if she's aware, but most ex-Muslims are actually from Muslim countries and Muslim communities. That's just by numbers, because most Muslims are in Muslim countries and Muslim communities. So statistically, that's where most ex-Muslims are from. Not to invalidate the existence of ex-Muslims in the West, for example, who grew up in the West, but she's ignoring the majority of the population of ex-Muslims in the world just to make her point.
This is an absolutely nonsense claim by Aladdin and a horribly discriminatory description of Muslims. I grew up with many good people who were not Muslim. Once again, my videos was a response to ex-Muslim influencers who use Islamophobia to attack Muslims. If that's not you, why are you triggered? Why are you stereotyping all Muslims? Or are you just attacking me for content so you can get more donations? The irony of Aladdin accusing me of making false accusations against him, or us as he refers to all ex-Muslim influencers once again, is ridiculous when he's the one that made an hour-plus video making non-stop false accusations about me. Make your mind up, Aladdin. Either you're the exception to the rule or you represent all of that ex-Muslim online influencer community that you keep referring to as us, even the antagonists. And to counter his point about most ex-Muslims being from Muslim countries, what has that got to do with the Islamophobe influencers that are ex-Muslims that are so vocal online? The majority of ex-Muslims in Muslim countries are not online attacking Muslims. My video was not referring to them. Once again, it was in response to social media grifter ex-Muslims from the West that targeted me first. So your point is completely invalid. Let's roll the next clip where these two clowns accuse me of racism against my own race, which is just idiotic. I don't like using the term coconut as it can be considered a slur and has been used against me because of my accent and my upbringing in the past, before I became a proper practicing Muslim. But ironically, these Muslims and cultural Muslims are coconuts that are totally unaware they are coconuts, trying to convince people that they are not coconuts.
So it's a derogatory term for a brownish person who's not acting brown enough, or is acting too white. She's not against the term itself. She's glad that she's no longer a coconut. She means to say that it's because you lost the connection with the motherland, or wherever it is that you're actually from, because you're not from the country that you're in right now and you don't belong in that country. She's trying to instill that sense of otherness in you and making you insular, so that you have to belong to the Muslim community in the country that you're in. You can never assimilate. You can never have traits that are common to the white people around you. And she's just exacerbating that for people, shaming them for it, and making it seem as if you're not Muslim enough because you aren't keeping up with your race. It's disgusting.
It's odd to me to say that, yes, while certain, races and nationalities of people tend to have certain characteristics, and those include like either psychological or cultural characteristics coming from certain places, like, yeah, that's a thing. But to expect someone to stick to that essential category forever and not being able to change their mind about anything, not being able to have personality traits that are different, like you having interests or beliefs that are different from this essentialist category of someone from the Middle East, like that makes you not truly Middle Eastern anymore. That's just gross.
I acknowledge the existence of such people, but most of what drives them is that their own quote-unquote community is extremely hostile towards them and shames them for even a little bit of deviation, to the point that they say, well, I'll go and jump into the arms of the people who do accept me, even if they're just using me as a poster child or as a token friend. It's not helped by attitudes of people like her. And this kind of attitude also gets people to romanticize the homeland or the motherland, or even an Islamic ummah that never existed. I just don't think that a psychologist of all people should be talking this way, to remind you that that's her profession.
Oh, God, I can't imagine going to like a marriage and family therapist and person saying, oh, so you're telling me like your kid's a coconut. You need to deal with that. That's a problem. Yikes.
Who do I have to email to get her fired?
Aladdin once again has this completely wrong. Number one, the meaning of coconut is not what he made up on the spot. It is a term that was used in the UK between brown people and black people to describe people of colour that are ashamed of their race or religion, so much so that they not only denounce it, but they go out of their way to demonise others from their particular ethnicity and side with racist ideologies to do so in the process. Number two, I was not calling anyone specifically a coconut. The person that attacked me first used the term coconut first, not me. They were saying that they weren't a coconut, despite displaying all the traits I just described, hence my statement. Number three, I was not calling anyone to come back to a particular motherland or speaking about brown people or white people in a bad way, as he foolishly lied about. Number four, this moron falsely said that I insinuated that Muslims can never have traits like white people. Honestly, look through my content. I defend white Muslims and advise other Muslims never to show prejudice towards white people, even if they are non-Muslim. So he's just flat out lying and making things up. He's absolutely no credibility at this point. Is Aladdin that much of a dimwit that he doesn't know that Islam spans across all races? He accused me of shaming people of not being Muslim enough by not keeping up with their race. No one said that but you absolute scammer. And Drew just went with Aladdin's completely false analysis, accusing me of racism, which is rich because throughout their hour-long attack on me, he has made ignorant, stereotypical and discriminatory comments about not only me, but all Muslims in general. Take a look in the mirror, boys, and learn some manners. These guys proceeded to call me gross and disgusting. I guess it's okay to bully women online these days as long as they're Muslim, right guys? Then Drew goes on to speak about children, accusing me of calling kids coconuts, and Aladdin chimes in with he wants to get me fired. Wow, if anything from your conduct, it is in fact you two that are coming across as gross and disgusting. And don't worry, Aladdin, I'm not going to stoop to your level to get you fired from your little part-time job, because I know it's barely keeping you afloat and you really need that money. My advice is to not give these types of people any attention, as they are frauds. They could live their lives privately as non-Muslims and talk about or sell other things online, but they choose to be antagonists and choose to put out negativity about Islam Islam.
As opposed to the positivity that she's spreading about Islam right now. And while she can choose to sell anything or talk about anything online, she chooses to use Islam to sell whatever her brand is.
I'll end with how to deal with relatives that have become ex-Muslims. Firstly, let them know you're against this. In Islam, we have strict rules of kinship, and Muslims are encouraged not to cut family ties. So if you think you can bring a relative back to Islam, then you should show compassion and try to advise them. And through kindness and your example as a good Muslim, invite them back to Islam. However, if the person has no intention of doing so, then it is best to keep one's distance, as they may negatively influence you and your kids through their lifestyle, behavior, and attitude.
I just think that shunning someone who doesn't believe, especially a family member, especially a child, has more to do with defending your own ego and defending cultural homogeneity than it has to do with building functional relationships and allowing people to have a good quality of life, especially when it comes to a spouse or a child.
Notice how she sugarcoated and spun that by first emphasizing how Islam talks about kinship and ties and all that kind of stuff, and then immediately negated all that by saying, but if they're not going to believe, just cut them off because, you don't want them influencing you. Again, imagine if I said that kind of rhetoric about Muslims. I would never say something like that.
Yeah, I would think that that's a pretty gross and discriminatory, bigoted thing to say.
Once again, because you guys don't seem to have a brain cell between you, my initial video was a response, not an attack. Most of my content is positive and has an Islamic lesson, whereas most of your content is you crying about your identity crisis as an ex-Muslim. Like I said, I ignored your weird ex-Muslim online influencer cult until they attacked me first, just like you're doing right now. You can see how triggered little Aladdin is, that his ex-Muslim grift has been exposed. He's blatantly using not being a Muslim to make money, not to make the world a better place, not to give people moral guidance, simply to serve his shallow little ego and make a profit. He hates that I speak about Islam and projects his seedy motives onto me. I'm not grifting. In fact, recently I've been contemplating quitting social media altogether to focus on my family, and to be completely honest, I probably will by the end of the year. And then Drew goes on to bring kids into it yet again. I didn't say anything about shunning a child like you falsely claimed. I was referring to adults that leave Islam. I specifically said we don't want our kids to be around people who may negatively influence them, as they may negatively influence you and your kids through their lifestyle. Drew, parents get to choose who is around their children, not you. I'll let the viewers decide after watching this, would you ever leave your kids alone with either of these guys? I know I wouldn't. And then the liar, Aladdin, takes specific words I've sincerely and honestly said about showing compassion to family members who have left Islam and showing them an example of kindness, which was me quoting Islamic scholars on the rules of kinship. And he twists it to say that I didn't mean that just because I also said to keep your distance if they are too far gone living a life of sin. I guess my kind approach doesn't fit his earlier narrative of falsely accusing me of inciting violence. Aladdin goes on to say, imagine if he said that about Muslims and acted as if he never would. He may not outright say it, but his content is all about turning people away from Islam and showing it in a negative light, which by default makes people shun Muslims. And Drew goes on to once again accuse me of being gross, discriminatory, and bigoted. You know what is gross and bigoted? Two creepy misogynistic guys teaming up to attack one woman online, name-calling, lying, talking about my children, trying to get me fired. You two are disgusting and pathetic people.
It's almost as if they consciously realize that there is no cure for critical thinking, that if you start questioning, you'll never stop. I know that if I look into this further, I'm not going to be a believer. I don't know how aware she is of that, but on some level it seems like they acknowledge that you cannot stop apostasy except using force and coercion. Maybe she'll understand that critical thinking is necessary to arrive at the truth, and if your truth cannot withstand critical thinking, it is not true.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to join my free Telegram group via the link in the description, where we as Muslims can speak freely and without censorship about issues like this, and in order to guide and support each other in our deen. And remember to like, subscribe, and become a channel member for access to exclusive content. Until next time, inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
So she does ask people to like, subscribe, and become members and donate.
To end your video where you're accusing someone of being a scam artist with this, that's pretty hilarious, honestly.
Thank you to her for reminding us. Like, subscribe, share, become a member, join Patreon. Don't forget to support us, because if you do so, you're amplifying our voices over the voices of such hateful people.
So Aladdin's little brain seems to think critically thinking is only applicable when it comes to leaving a religion. As I already stated in this video, I lived most of my life as a cultural Muslim, and it was in fact critical thinking and studying Islam, gaining Islamic qualifications, that brought me into the religion properly. So your point on critical thinking is invalid, little boy. Then Aladdin goes on to say that we fear apostasy and that we think it can't be stopped without force or coercion. We're not trying to stop apostasy. We don't care if you leave, bro. We're just trying to protect our children from people like you that want them to think like you. Go be an ex-Muslim, have a good life, just leave Muslims and Islam out of it. But you can't do that, can you? The irony is, when you were Muslim, you needed Islam to give relevance to your identity. And now that you're ex-Muslim, you still need Islam to give relevance to your identity. And you saw how he played the clip of me promoting my Telegram group by first stereotyping me as an extremist, then insinuating that the Telegram group is even more extreme. Is this not bigotry? Simply because I'm Muslim, they profile me as an extremist. It's disgusting Islamophobia, and this proves my argument in the first place. These two geeks can't help themselves using anti-Muslim stereotypes to attack me simply because I'm Muslim and they are atheists. My Telegram group is public. It has admins that monitor every message. We have a strict policy of no extremism, no racism, no violence, no curse words, no nudity, no bullying, and no discrimination. People are removed immediately if they ever display such traits. You're welcome to join and check the history of the group. And what is actually hilarious, Drew, neither of you proved that you weren't scammers. You just lied for over an hour and Aladdin just begged people for money 5 or 6 times. Ladies, don't be intimidated by men like this. They're just a couple of secular geeks posing as sentinel beings enlightened by atheism, worshipping themselves whilst looking down on religious people and thinking it's okay to gang up on women online because they see Muslim women as vulnerable and easy targets. Sorry boys, nice try, but you just lost a Muslim girl. Better luck next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.